Hi, Steve. Welcome here today. Just wonder if you could share a little bit about yourself with the audience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Daryl. Where do you want to go?
Your name. Tell us a bit about yourself. Name, family, job, kids, that sort of thing.
Well, my name is Stephen Twiss, and I have a wife, Deborah. We've been
Hmm.
married over 25 years, and we have two children.
Okay.
Nathan is 26, and he has two children, Gavin and Jackson, who are 6 and 2, and his wife, Rebecca. And our daughter, Brittany, is 22 herself. And Deborah and I have been in Belleville for 20 plus years.
Wow.
I've worked at Interface all of those years.
Hmm.
And we just love the Belleville, love the area, and really happy in this community. So Deborah and I began attending Maranatha 13 years ago in 1996.
Hmm.
And we had been looking around at different churches for a little while, and were invited to Maranatha and
Okay.
really enjoyed our first service there.
Right. So tell us a bit about your journey up until that point. Were you always a churchgoer?
When I was young, my mother took me to church. We
Hmm.
attended a church in Hamilton on a regular basis every Sunday. My father came once in a while. My sister and I went regularly. I was involved in the church a little bit.
Right.
And then around the teenage years, I just started to lose interest. Around 15 or 16, stopped attending,
Hmm.
and then only attended church then on very infrequent basis.
So would you say that you had a faith, or did you believe in God in those years that you weren't attending?
Yeah, I think I've always had a belief in God, always as a distant, uninvolved God. I've had conflict in that
Hmm.
because I did grow up thinking about God and thinking about creation,
Right.
but in a public school system that did not ever confirm that, but only spoke evolution.
Yes.
It left very conflicted thoughts for me. Then how do you make that work? How do you make those two extreme opposites work together?
Right.
And in conversation with family or friends, that never became clear for me.
So what finally brought you to church? What was it that drew you there, or how did you end up there?
After about 15 years of marriage and finding that we weren't happy,
Hmm.
there was never enough money for the things
Right.
that we thought would bring us happiness, so we tried to work harder. And I noticed in our relationship there was no depth to it between
Mm.
Deborah and I. Our children were getting beginning in the teenage years,
Right.
and just really felt there was no peace in my life.
Hmm.
And it was funny because one of the things I remembered about my church of my youth was a sense of peace
Mm.
in the pew
Right.
of this small Anglican church. And so it got me thinking about church.
Right.
And for Deborah, it was a little different. She was wondering about our children not having had any church upbringing, and so she felt called to church for the children's sake.
Right. So can you describe the first day that you walked in, what that was like for you, and what led up to that?
Well, again, we were used to church, so we were used to church structures and
Hmm.
singing hymns, and so it was fairly a comfortable setting for us to step into at Maranatha the first time. We had also church shopped a little bit before coming there
Okay.
and saw what we didn't like. So our first visit to Maranatha, there was a different sense of presence there.
Hmm.
We couldn't describe that except we felt comfortable and comforted in that environment. And so we thought we'd come back.
So was there any changes that occurred as you came back to church? Did you see any differences in your life or in your faith?
Well, certainly after coming to Maranatha for a couple of months, there was a point where I said the sinner's prayer on
Hmm.
my own behalf
Hmm.
and made that commitment.
Right.
And no stars or no fireworks went off
Hmm.
at that point.
Right.
And Deborah also made that commitment herself. And that was a commitment then to really attend church
Right.
and nothing more.
Okay.
It was during our first summer that we took the Alpha course that Deborah and I began to see that this was not about church attendance or about being religious. It was
Yes.
about a relationship with a living God.
Right.
Once we realized that, then things started to change.
What would you say was the most significant changes that occurred? What areas of your life did God start to work in?
I could just not blame everybody else for my own problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to look at my relationship with Deborah much differently, because for 15 years I had blamed Deborah for my unhappiness in our marriage.
Okay.
And I had to start looking at that. I felt compelled to look at that differently and look at what I was contributing to the marriage and how that could change. That was evident also at work and in different environments where I had been living a life for me.
How has community played a role in your journey at Maranatha?
For those 15 years when I was outside of church and Deborah and I were trying to raise a family and do life together, I spent a lot of time in my own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't share a lot with Deborah, so I kept a lot inside. And it was in the community of faith with other believers that I could start talking about some of the words and some of the feelings that I had never expressed before.
Right.
Talk about patterns in my life and why the same things would reoccur that would
Mm-hmm.
cause me trouble and problems in life. Being able to talk about those things within the community of a church environment was very significant.
What would you say has been the highlight of your journey so far since coming back to church?
One of the scriptures that I felt strongly about when I first came back to church was a scripture that's found in the book of Joel that says, "I will restore the years the locusts have eaten away."
Mm-hmm.
And in my relationship with Deborah, it felt like there was 15 years that were wasted.
Wow.
And when you realize that, you wonder how can you possibly make up for that? And so over the last 10 years, we have seen our relationship grow and the love in our relationship deepen to a point where we can't remember a time when it hasn't been like this.
What would you say to somebody who's watching today that may feel like there is no hope?
When I think about the hope that's been restored in my own life, specifically if I look at our marriage,
Mm-hmm.
our marriage wasn't bad before, it just wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that that can be restored to a point where I do not want to spend my life with anybody else but Deborah,
Mm-hmm.
and the joy that we have in a relationship that easily could have ended in divorce, that has just given me so much hope for other
Mm-hmm.
people who might find themselves in a similar situation, where you think, whether it's a relationship with a spouse or a relationship with a child or a relationship with a friend, that those relationships can be restored and they can be better than they ever were before.